1300s, maybe 1200s. And Garchen Rinpoche, our great teacher, has said that the entire Buddhist path is crystallized in this little poem. So it's easy to read, short, and lacking in some technical language that sometimes confuses people. But where there's a term that you don't know, just to investigate and find out what does it mean. Because the Dharma language is, in Tibetan and Sanskrit, is extremely valuable because it's precise. In English, we sort of come up with words that are maybe kind of work, but we don't have the tradition and this vast intellectual history. I mean, for instance, Naropa, you can go to India today and go to the ruins of Naropa University. It's this massive university, 1,000 years ago, way predating Oxford and Harvard, no doubt about it. You're talking about more than 1,000 years before. Tremendous, intellectual rigor. And this is 1,000 years after the Buddha passed away. So there's very, very helpful, even in the opening prayers, for instance, when we were talking about very first one, and may I quickly attain precious, unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. This is not just some random word that some poet put together. These all have precise meanings. In Sanskrit, it's Anuttara Amyat Sambodhi. Every syllable has meaning. So the Tibetans did something very remarkable. They decided from the top down. The emperor decided, okay, we're going to be Buddhists now. And they sent their best and brightest over the Himalaya mountains for centuries. And they actually developed, first of all, the writing system. They had no writing system before, based on Sanskrit, completely different language, but nonetheless, the writing system, and then carefully did these translations, syllable by syllable. Almost always, it's an exact literal translation between Sanskrit and Tibetan, but sometimes not. So sometimes, for instance, in Sanskrit, the word guru, I think it means something like, like one shining with qualities or something like that. Whereas the Tibetans, instead of translating that specifically guru, they did lama, and la is highest wisdom, and ma is highest compassion. So those two things together, a guru, a lama, is someone who combines wisdom and compassion. And the Buddha said we fly to Buddhahood on two wings, one of wisdom and one of compassion. And if you've only got one wing going, you're not going anywhere. It has to be a complete understanding. So it's extremely helpful. And so in this little book, it goes through the Bodhisattva path. The first 20 verses are the conventional, the whole thing is conventional teachings, but the first 20 verses are considered especially like self-liberation. And thereafter starts with the realization into the nature of the mind and how do you act out of that. So Buddhism is kind of like reverse engineering. The Buddha came to his great awakening and then he taught. He initially hesitated to teach because he said human beings are really kind of a big problem. They can pervert anything to fame and gain, is what he said. And of course, that's true. We're all running around saying all the wonderful words, but meanwhile, what's our behavior? Meanwhile, what's being produced by those words? Things can be completely upside down. So he hesitated to teach. It said that the gods of ancient India appeared to him and said, no, you have to, because there are people for whom your teachings will benefit. And so he did for 45 years. So this is extremely helpful because you have someone like a Buddha with a great enlightenment, and then these teachings came out of that. And for us, we can use those teachings like, again, reverse engineering. It takes us in the right direction. When they talk about the nature of the mind, the problem that we have, although the Kalachakra Tantra says that all beings are Buddhas, Buddha means completely awakened, all beings are Buddhas. Apart from those Buddhas, there are no Buddhas. So all these sentient beings, the earthworms, the flies, the cattle in the field, they're all Buddhas. We're all Buddhas, but we don't know it. We're in a state of basically being asleep. And that's why we say we need to wake up. But this is not something that, you take out the garbage and then it's all over. Because we have pounded ourselves for lifetimes. Our mind is not subject to birth and death. And this is something that's hard for us to, accept often in our materialistic world, our strongly scientific world. Buddhism doesn't deny science, but it goes a little bit farther. I mean, if you want an image, it's kind of like, we go back to the Big Bang, right? All time and space come out of the Big. What happened before the Big Bang? We don't even go there. Buddhism does. So these teachings are extremely helpful. We need to realize our true nature, and this is what Buddhism is all about. All the methods that it teaches are the ways for us to, one, get rid of our delusion, to purify our mind of the dross, and then also to build up this incredible positive momentum in our mind. We call it merit. And often in our kind of, Protestant culture, we don't like the word merit because it sounds like, oh, I have merit. Some people don't. It violates our ideas of egalitarianism. But merit is just when you flip the light switch, the lights go on. Everything's working. We have this natural merit. So we develop that. It's done primarily through meditation. But meditation is not just what we think of as sitting in a funny posture with your back straight and certain mental exercises. Meditation in Tibetan is gom. It means to grow accustomed to. So if you're thinking about virtuous things, your mind is growing accustomed to thinking about virtuous things. And because the mind is the king, even though there's something more fundamental than our thinking mind, still, we're training ourselves in this way. So some of you have heard me tell this story about a very intelligent and well-read American who went to Japan in the early 1950s. And he went to a Buddhist monastery, and there was a master, teacher, and then there were all these young monks, some old monks, but monks there. And he saw the concluding ceremony that they do every night. And if I can remember the verse, it's from Chinese Buddhism. All beings without number, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passions, I vow to uproot. Dharma gates without, thank you, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to attain. So this, again, sophisticated, educated Western man with a critical mind said to the Zen master, do they really believe that? And he said, not at first, with a big grin. We have to train the mind. The teachings of Buddha are so incredibly positive and hopeful. Why? Because it teaches that you can do practice for your whole life, endless mantra, and maybe have no realization at all. Normally people would be discouraged by that kind of thing. But what happens? It says at the moment of death, it's like naturally this body is going to dissolve. We're going to lose our attachments to all these. The body is so powerful for us in terms of our focus, in terms of our awareness, in terms of our concentration. We have we sort of colonized all of our mind into just awareness of the body. And we can use that awareness to get beyond the body, so to speak. But nonetheless, at the moment of death, we lose that. And so it's said that the mind, freed of that attachment, the Tibetans have a funny number, 19 times more powerful. So it's said that your understanding, your good merit can telescope at the time of birth. And that even a lifetime that seems like, oh, why did I do all this? You can be liberated in that moment of death. So these are incredible to our modern mind teachings. And yet, 2,600 years. Do you think people have just been tricked for 2,600 years? So we bore into it, and that's the advantage of this little book. You can take a verse and just try to hold one verse during the day. You can read through this book once a day and then contemplate it. The way to freedom, according to the Buddha, is the first to learn, first to hear the Dharma, hear the truth, and then to reflect on it, analyze it. Because the peace that comes from hearing that there's a way out of suffering, it gives a certain kind of openness in the mind, a certain kind of relief. It's not like nonstop suffering anymore, but there's a possibility. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. But then the light that comes from studying and analyzing, thinking about it, pounding these teachings, is this really true? You're doing this self-critical kind of analysis. That understanding becomes more stable. And then with that, we meditate, we grow accustomed to that understanding. And that takes us all the way to Buddhahood. It's truly something remarkable. So this little book is extremely valuable. And please feel free to take one. The Buddha started his teaching. Sometimes I think, what would it be like, if you were sitting in the jungle in India and suddenly omniscience dawned on you? I mean, what do you do? And so when he finally taught, which was maybe 100 days later, I can't remember, something like that, in Varanasi, the suburb of Varanasi called Sarnath, he started out by teaching. His very first teaching was the noble truth, like a holy truth, of suffering, of dissatisfaction. And I think it's such genius, because as I look around the world, anyone that I meet, I share this kind of human dissatisfaction with them. They can be an ogre like a Hitler. They can be a saint like a Mother Teresa. But yet we have this basic dissatisfaction as human beings. All the bugs, all the animals, my cat, they're all meowing. They're all looking around chasing happiness. We have that situation. So there's an instant way to identify with everyone and everything. It's truly amazing, because if you state some sort of belief, it divides people. It's so funny. Even things that are very sincere, that are excellent beliefs, all these things, but still, if you're trying to get people to believe something, it's like, you tell me, don't think about rhinoceros. What do I think about? Rhinoceros. There's instant kind of reactions. But the Buddha, genius. Let me read it to you, this first noble truth. See if I can find it in here. If I can. Of course, now I can't find it. Yeah, here we go. What then is the holy truth of ill? In Sanskrit, the word is dukkha. It's the word that was used to describe an ox cart when the axle was off center. Like you go to Wegmans, you get one of those carts. It's just always going in the wrong direction. I mean, it's doing something, but it's always with all this extra effort and kind of frustration. So dukkha, here he translates as ill, sometimes dissatisfaction, sometimes as suffering, but it means more than just like what we call suffering. What then is the holy truth of ill? Birth is ill. Decay, aging, is ill. Sickness is ill. Death is ill. To be conjoined with what one dislikes means suffering. To be disjoined from what one likes means suffering. Not to get what one wants, also, that means suffering. In short, all grasping at any of the 5 skandhas involves suffering. The 5 skandhas are when we start to analyze, who is the self that's suffering? And we look in an inner way through using this increased power of your mind, through calming it, through meditation. all you see are basically body and mind. And so these 5 accumulations are called the 5 skandhas in Sanskrit. But basically, the understanding comes is that you see the body, you see the perceptions, you see the feelings, you see the consciousness, but there's no self in there. So this is radical examination, like taking a scalpel and cutting up your mind, trying to find this self, because we say, this is my mind, my eye, my nose. Well, what is that my? Everything seems to be based on this my. And the Buddha said here that the cause of suffering is just that, all grasping at any of the 5 skandhas. So when we grasp to our body, we're creating suffering. When we grasp to any aspect of our mind, we're creating suffering. And so it sort of throws us. It's like, well, what? I feel like I'm cast out on an ocean or something. How can I find anything solid? So that's where the confidence comes in, because Buddhism is not the practice of blind faith, not at all. But we use this flicker of confidence that we have and use that to investigate more fully, more deeply. But truly, the Dharma will never let you down. One thing pure and beautiful. One thing through which you will understand everything. Very hard to believe that anything like this can even exist. And they say in this analysis, when it's like you sort of exhaust your thinking, so to speak, and then it becomes this pure kind of experience. We can use our thinking mind to get to the end of the thinking mind, these highest concepts. We can just imbibe in the understanding of those concepts, and our mind will naturally ripen. Or there are all sorts of other techniques where you can say, well, okay, I guess it's really true, and I can visualize myself as a Buddha right now. And then, because it seems like imagination, but you're actually in touch with your true nature, you start to manifest positive things in your mind in a way that you didn't see how it worked. I get a headache, I take aspirin. I have no idea how that aspirin is working. And yet I like the result I get. That's sort of how the Tantra is, highest kind of teachings. So when they talk about the nature of mind, what are we trying to experience? What are the qualities of this essence of mind, this nature of mind that we all have, but somehow is covered over by what? It's covered over by our karma, the actions in our lives. These are the results of things that we've put into motion before in this life or previously. And it blocks us. You know what it's like. You can be having all sorts of wonderful, compassionate thoughts, and then you get a migraine headache. You're just locked into that migraine headache. So again, our mind is colonized. The karmas, all the things that we experience, everything you can read about in the history books, everything you can read about in the newspaper, on TV, that's the veil of karma. Everyone's just living on that level. Buddhism says that has been produced by our afflictive emotions, our angers, our jealousies, our envies, the whole mess of it, the 84,000 negative emotions. Those are what produced the karma that we experience. And they veil the mind too. And what has produced the afflictions? It's our dualistic sense. I'm here, you're there. Therefore, my anger makes sense. You're harming me, that inherent side of me. The dualism that we experience produces the afflictions, which produces the karmas, which veils our mind. But the innermost veil is the veil of co-emergence. In other words, the very sense that we're somehow alienated from everything, that we're split. So that's what we're doing as Buddhism. We're getting to the cause. If you fix the cause, it's like genetic engineering. They have some of these remarkable cures that happen. When you find the cause, bingo, the effect goes away. Or even not, I'm talking about genetics because it has a very inner kind of thing, but even in an outer way. They discovered the cause of polio. There was something they could do. Smallpox, eliminated. So when you talk about the Dharma gives us encouragement, because even though we have not realized this to any degree, perhaps, we still have some sort of confidence, enough that there's curiosity. Maybe there's some benefit in this Buddhism baloney. What's going on? You see someone like the Dalai Lama and you think, my God, he's a world leader. He was head of his country. He's like, this is not your ordinary politician. So it can at least generate some doubt, some good kind of doubt. And then you just work on that. You just keep going with it. It's a vast educational system, you might say. But when they talk, so they give us ideas to give us encouragement about the nature of mind. What is this nature of mind? Well, first, it's vast. It's like this room. It's full of space. We can negotiate. We can move. We're not like fixed. It's as vast as the Hubble telescope, the Webb telescope, vaster. But anyway, it's like an empty room, all right? And then what else? Well, there's light. There's light filling this empty space. It's not just an empty space. There's light there, which means there's the potential of learning. And then finally, there's a knowingness. There's an intelligence. It's not just a void. We're able to say, that's a dust mote. That's an elephant, that's red, that's blue. We have the ability to distinguish. So in the terminologies, which you can, as you learn more deeply, this vastness of the mind is called the Dharmakaya, the body of truth. And there are teachings, Mahamudra, they're called, the Great Seal, or Dzogchen, the Great Completion, the Great Perfection, in which you practice by with great faith, jumping right into that vastness. In that vastness, there's nothing you can say. You can't say it's big. You can't say it's small. It's just the vastness. But then there's the light that fills that space. This is called, in the terminology, is Sambhogakaya, the body of bliss. And this is what all these visualized forms are. This is what is emphasized, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, not in all different Buddhist traditions, but in the completion of Buddhism, the perfection, the fullness of Buddhism. The Sambhogakaya is practicing on that light. And it's so immediately helpful because, like I've told people, in our normal way of existing, right? I have some responsibility here. I mean, all of us do, but, responsibility for White Lotus. You got to make sure the rent's paid and the heat, all these things. And I'm sitting here and you're always trying to, offer more. And here you are. Someone walks in this room right now with, a big stack of gold. And because of my inherent kind of corruption, I can't just rest with that. I'm thinking like, oh, that's good. And then I start thinking, oh, damn, do we have enough insurance? What if this place burns down in the next 5 minutes? I should be hiding that. We should get to the bank right now. All this stuff is generated because of my conceptual understanding of gold, its context, my loss and gain, all these kinds of things. That's where we live, right? But if you're visualizing yourself as a Buddha and you have a gold crown on, you don't have that attachment. Because from your own experience, well, it's just my mind. I'm just visualizing this. The truth is that we're visualizing all of this stuff right now. We just don't know it. We give weight to our own level of kind of understanding and visualization. And this is the great truth of the Tantra, that all of this stuff is our visualization too. So therefore, it can be successfully used to get beyond our ignorance into that vastness. So you have the space, you have the light, Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and then you have the knowingness, the articulation. That's a picture, that's a woman, that's a torma, that's a cup, this is coffee. And that's called Nirmanakaya. And that means the emanation body of our mind, the emanation body of the Buddha. It's also called the deceptive body. And it's something that I love about the Buddhists, that here their teachings, they call their teachings, that what is called Buddhism, as being deceptive, because it's not the full understanding. We're dealing with beings like ourselves with dualistic mind, with karma, with afflictions. And so it's a reverse engineering by which you can use seemingly our shortcomings. We can use our ordinary understanding. And that's what all of this is. The critical thing is that it works. Again, like the aspirin, I may not know how it works, but if I see some benefit, I tend to have more and more faith. And then if you have a great doctor who says, well, this aspirin might help you, then they might say, why don't you try this one too? So we're extremely fortunate in all of this, because it's it's a little bit, it's not part of our culture. I think it's at the core of our culture, truly. I mean, I remember I was raised as Episcopalian, and went through some sort of existential crisis as a young man, wrestling with why do we have to die, and looking around the world, and it seems like everyone's asleep. They don't realize, why are you getting a degree? You're just going to die. What's the point? These things can be very powerful and very upsetting. I remember going to all sorts of churches, talking to all sorts of ministers, looking for some sort of answer. And it wasn't until somehow stumbling onto the Buddha's teachings that something said, maybe there's something there. But after fully discovering my path, one of the first things I did was read the New Testament for the first time. And then you suddenly see, you're looking through a Buddhist eye. I mean, I can't tell my Christian friends that because it sounds arrogant. But, when Jesus says, seek and you shall find, it's cause and effect. When he's surrounded by a bunch of hostile scholars, and he said, the kingdom of God is within, I know what that means as a Buddhist. On the cross, when he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's the teaching on samsara. So suddenly all this made sense, but in a deeper way. And for the first time, you feel true oneness with other people. We're all out there saying, I mean, when we had this great teaching, the Kala Chakra teaching, come to Rochester in 1997, and we somehow were tasked with making it happen. At the time we had a Dharma center, but we didn't have a phone. We were really low key. And the first thing we did is we signed up to rent the brand new Rochester Convention Center for $20,000. If you look at that from the outside, it looks like you're insane. But nonetheless, this wonderful event that we had. Now I forgot where I was going with this. What was I talking about? Say? Maybe it'll come back. Nonetheless. Yeah, maybe it'll come back. At any rate, it's not an ordinary kind of cultural conditioning that we have. There's differences in attitude, in different, like, tacit assumptions, Professor Kanze calls it, that where Buddhism and Hinduism differ from our Western traditions. Let's see. Well, nonetheless, one of the things is that the inner looking is valid. This is more than just mere psychology. There's a truth to be discovered there. And also in the East, there's this belief in a hierarchical world. A Buddha has more wisdom realized than I do. I have that same wisdom too, but it's occluded. So there are hierarchies. And this is not really something that's so radical if you think about it. I mean, you take a physics course in high school, your physics teacher has a certain kind of understanding. You go to college, there's more. Someone goes to the Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton, has much, much more. So there's a hierarchy, it's natural. You're learning tennis, there are different levels of accomplishment. And so we understand that. These are making the discriminations that we do in a sensible, intelligent way, a scientific way. So there are different kind of assumptions And yet, for most of us, I mean, virtually all of us, because of our own cultural conditioning, there are some sort of obstacles there, but they're easily overcome just by practicing and by seeing the results, both in your own life and certainly in the great teachers that we've been fortunate to come across. This understanding of the nature of mind is something that is doable. In fact, when we do any of these deceptive practices, making offerings, we're actually in touch with our true nature. This is how our true nature appears in our life, manifests in our life. So there's obviously an element of faith there, because there are differences. This hierarchy means that some things are like sacred, some things aren't. Yes, in the Dharmakaya, the vastness, it's like there's a great equality, everything's the same. But in order to get there, it's like we have to practice discrimination. So Buddha Amitabha's, the Buddha of limitless light, that's what Amitabha means. Buddha Amitabha's wisdom is said to be discriminating transcendent wisdom, which of course is a paradox. If it's transcendent, why are we discriminating at all? But that's the situation we're in as human beings. This is a situation we've created. There are some things which are helpful. For instance, patience is helpful, anger is not. So we start to make these discriminations. We learn, and then we start to practice. You've heard me tell the story about, we had a psychiatrist who was a member of the Dharma Center, and he had been, trying to practice patience and of the six perfections, especially patience, for about 6 months. And he told me that this is before cell phones, that he would, once a week call his mother. And of course, being a psychiatrist, he had all sorts of issues with his mother. And he talked about one time, after 6 months of, contemplating patience, he found himself screaming at his mother on the telephone. In the midst of the scream, which he had done before, it suddenly occurred upon him, he's supposed to be patient. Just that thought. And what was revealing to him is that he couldn't stop screaming. The habit's so great, he just kept letting her have it. But it had been broken. He knew from his own experience, I'm supposed to be practicing patience. So it was lessened than the total outrage of hatred. And that's how it goes, step by step by step. It's said when they talk about the three doors here. What are the doors? How do we experience reality? Through our mind, through our speech, and through our body. And so you've heard me give the example too. It's like you've decided you're going to, practice patience, and you're driving down the freeway and some guy cuts you off. And what do? You, with your body, flip him the bird. With your mouth, you say, you SOB, get out of my life. And with your mind, you're thinking, I want to kill you. I'm exaggerating here, of course. But what happens with this practice? Well, the first thing that goes away is the body. It's the grossest level of our existence. So you get caught off in traffic, you don't throw him the bird, but you're still saying, you SOB, get out of my life, and I want to kill you, thinking. Eventually, the speech goes away too pretty fast, but you're still thinking, I want to kill you. If you can believe the practices and you can believe your own experience, that gets lesser, until it becomes, Mom, why are you cutting me off? You know better. Instead, you start to identify with that person. You see all the times that you've cut somebody off in traffic or whatever the particular offense is. And so instead of this radical alienation, which is the definition of suffering, instead of this radical alienation, you're suddenly embracing the suffering beings. And that is your liberation. Wonder upon wonders. And so all this stuff that can seem artificial, it's like the aspirin, it works. And what do? I don't want to take aspirin. Why should I take aspirin? Tell me completely how all this is going to work, and then maybe I'll think about taking aspirin. I don't like that brand of aspirin. I mean, whatever. Lama Tarchin said it's like we're in the middle of an ocean and we're drowning. We're a lake, a big lake, drowning. They got big lakes in Tibet. They don't have an ocean. But drowning in this big lake, and someone throws you a rope. That rope is the Dharma. And Lama Tartana says, hold on to the rope and just start pulling yourself to shore. He said, if you get tired, you can rest. If you're really, really bothered, go fast. He said, just don't let go of the rope. But that's what we do. I mean, people say, I don't like this rope. It's too small. It's too big. You know, it's not made out of organic materials. Or it is made out of organic. I want a nylon rope. You know, I mean, we do all this kind of stuff, sabotaging ourselves all the time because there isn't the basic confidence in the method. But when we do this kind of study, when we see the results, you know, you can see the transformation in lives, in whatever degree to yourself, but certainly in other people. You read the story of Milarepa. The guy went from murdering his relatives to Buddhahood in one lifetime. Wei Ning, the founder of a particular branch of Zen Buddhism in China. I mean, they're the greatest stories out there. And funnily, you know, our culture, we don't really know about it, but that's all right. That's all right. One great Chinese Pure Land master, Shen Tao, 1,000 years ago, had a dream. And he was being chased through a jungle by bandits and vicious animals. The vicious animals were the afflictions, the negative emotions, the klesha. The bandits were wrong views. The kind of views that don't allow you to further your own development. And then he came to a river, and the river was both on fire and was completely torn up by like tsunami-like waves. One side of the river on fire, the other side downstream, these incredible, you know, tsunami waves. And going across the river was this thin white ribbon. On the other side of the river was Buddha Amitabha saying, come on, come this way. And as you went towards Amitabha, the ribbon got wider and wider and wider until it was like a big highway. You could walk easily. But behind him was Buddha Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha. And he said, don't be afraid. Go ahead. This is it in a nutshell. This is the experience of thousands, perhaps millions of people, 2,600 years. Something that we can rely on. Okay, we can stop there. I was going to read this big inspiring thing and then I just got distracted. So there you go. But you get what you pay for, right? All right, any questions? Otherwise, we'll take a tea break and do a little practice when we come back. Rogo.
It does seem to be pretty profound the way you can use Buddhism to explain Christian ideology. Have you used that when you coming from your Christian background? Did you find it that Christianity made more sense once you became a Buddhist?
Yeah, that's what I would say. I would say, for instance, you can read the great theologians in that, Augustine, Aquinas, and the great Desert Fathers and all these people, and Thomas à Kempis, all of them, and like spent. So the Buddhist view is too, you know, we have two kind of delusions. One is called nihilism, which is the modern scientific view, shorn of anything else, any kind of morality, just that we're empty protoplasms just mindlessly mutating and nothing means anything and you're dead, you're gone. So there's that. The other is eternalism, which is the belief in a creator God. The advantage is that the nihilism is more dangerous. In the eternalism, there's belief in something greater than the self, and therefore the practice of virtue can result from that. That practice of virtue is what leads to good karma. So for the Buddhists, there's this, and the Buddhist view is in between. It's the middle way between the extremes of things exist and things don't exist. So what is this middle way? This is unique. But therefore, you can see the good that people are doing. You can't be born as a human being except for having done tremendous merit. But we have also done negative things, so we have this mix. But we have a situation, this is said to be the best situation in the vast universe, because although in the God realms, people can come to realization, it said the Buddha was a teacher of gods and men meaning human beings. It's so pleasurable in these upper, higher realms that people, they forget about suffering and they're not working. They're just riding on their past karma, so to speak, positive karma. But from the human realm, we have enough suffering that we want to make things better for ourselves. But we also have enough opportunity. Not all humans do, but precious human birth, there's enough opportunity. You've met a Buddha or come across the teachings still exist, and you can work on yourself. So you see it in that regards. You can look at different traditions and you see the benefits that are being there, or might be limited. That's all right. People are going in the right direction, so to speak. So it becomes real tolerance, though, that's what I was trying to get at before, not this phony tolerance. So when we bring in Kalachakra here, to promote the event, because we didn't have any money and we had rented the convention center for $20,000, I thought maybe I should do some promotion. So I joined various interfaith groups around town. And everybody in the interfaith groups is all saying all the right words. But, for me, it was kind of phony, not those people phony, but I remember before I came across the path, my verbalization of tolerance was kind of phony. It was really on the surface. I know I'm supposed to say this, look at Frank's a virtuous guy. He says everybody's great. But underneath it, hey, get off of my cloud, But with discovering the path, suddenly you see what people share in their goodness. You see the negative too, of course, but it became a real kind of suffering beings trying to find happiness to one degree or another, finding methods that work or only in a limited way, whatever. But anyway, it's starting to love people a little bit anyway. Okay, let's take a break and we'll come back and do some practice.